Hi, everyone. Welcome to Monday. This is week 2. This is joy, and it's going over the law. So it's mostly in the Old Testament. I was about to say it's all in the Old Testament, but it's not. Okay. So I noticed this is Nellie and I's greatest fear when we're working on projects. I noticed a typo. In Monday, Isaiah 9, 1 through 4 is the reference, but we only have 2 through 4 listed. So Byron is going to read, mainly because I keep not knowing how to pronounce these 2 words. So Byron's going to read verse 1 for us so we can see the whole of the, you're going to read the whole thing, but he's going to include verse 1. So if you're reading this on your own, make sure to look up Isaiah 9, 1 through 4.
So Isaiah 9, 1 through 4, and this is NIV. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered their yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor.
So the reason that verse 1 matters is if you go to the devotion portion, it says this passage is a prophecy about Jesus coming to earth. It's revealing the place he would start his ministry, the joy he'll bring as well as what he'll do for his people. And then it goes on to talk about Galilee. So it's a little confusing if you don't have verse 1, where it's referencing the fact that he is going to start his ministry in Galilee. And the reason that is significant is because Galilee was seen as less than, because the Jews who lived there were a mixed race Jew. So they weren't seen as being as, like on the same level as the people who were fully Jewish, which is obviously not cool. Saw a lot of racism in the Bible.
And they also, I remember hearing that like where Mary was from was like considered like backwater. It was like kind of like not the central
I actually don't
hub.
know where she's from.
It's like north of the sea. It's like on the north side of the sea. Anyways, like Jerusalem was more.
I can picture it in my mind. I have a whole map picture in my mind. Here's Galilee, and you take the Jordan, and you go down here, and this is the Dead Sea, and Galilee's here. Yeah. Jerusalem's here.
Well, right. So I think because it was far away from Jerusalem, or
it was just seen as
it's not.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that's interesting. So, so this is the upside down kingdom. Mm-hmm. It's important to look at significant moments in Jesus's life. Like, where was he born? Where did he start his ministry? Who were his parents? Who were the disciples? There's all of these things in his life that are important to look at because they tell us about Jesus. They are not little things. He didn't just happen to be born here or happen to start his ministry here. Like, he's making these decisions, or God is making these decisions because it's reflecting his kingdom and his values. And lifting those up that are seen as less than is consistently within the Bible. And then you also then it goes down to Midian's defeat. And that's referencing where Midian was defeated. So we looked it up, and it was Gideon's army. Yeah. And they started, I don't know what the number was that they started with, but the first number that left was like, what did I say, 22,000?
So in the thousands, 20,000.
Yeah, it's really high. And then it kept going down until there was only 300 men to defeat Midian. They rhyme, so which one am I saying?
Oppressors.
Yeah, and God said, this is so that you can't say you did it on your own.
Right.
And so then here we have that discussion point of, like looking at, are you doing something through God's strength?
Yeah.
Or are you doing something through your own strength?
Right.
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm just going to tell you what's happening. Our children are here.
One of them just tried coming in.
One of them just tried coming in. And I think we both just sat there for a second like, are they about to open the door?
Yeah.
So that was why we just got both distracted there for a second. So doing something not in not in your own strength, but in God's strength. And I think that is way harder to do than we think it is. I mean, I know for myself, I cannot tell you, like, I like to plan. And so a lot of times for me, my own strength is like my own plan. Like that's where like my strength is coming in.
Yeah.
And I like literally will feel like God calling me to do a certain thing that for me would be like a faith jump, right? Like it's something that's hard. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Especially if you're going to like ask for advice from someone, they'd be like, this would be like the logical thing to do. And God's like, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to do this other thing. And the amount of times I'm like, that's so great, God. I really love that. And I see your plan. But the thing is, I thought this a lot through, and I feel like my plan is so much better. And either I try to do my plan and it doesn't work, or God literally stops me from being able to do that plan. And then I end up having to do his plan originally, the one that he wanted me to do originally. And it's always okay.
It's always okay. Right. And then you can't boast.
Right.
It's like, but the thing is, oftentimes his plan is better or his way is better. Just because I feel like whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, I'm just trying to do that like power through thing because we have young kids.
Right.
We both work, like just the stress of it and trying to get through it. And then I always end up getting grumpy.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever, and I'm not bearing. And then when I like give up like my desire for like what the world would seem
like
as
control
success,
or power.
Yes, exactly. And I like give into that. I feel like I am then receiving his grace and then the fruits of the Spirit, which is then I'm present and patient and I'm like safe to then just be like an anchor for those around me and navigating through tough, hard push through times, but with like margins for people, but that, and I feel like oftentimes that's like the type of thing where it's like receiving God's power. It doesn't so much look like Samson power. No. It looks like calm.
Right. It looks like love.
Yes.
Like I feel like when his power is present, and also like there's a piece, like it says that you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders. And then you look at Jesus saying, my yoke is easy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he means, because it's like that feeling that when someone else is in charge.
Yeah.
Like I always make a joke when I show up to an event that Kristen is putting on. So Kristen is our children's director. When she's putting it on, I'll show up. And a lot of times people are like, oh, what do we do? I'm like, oh, I'm just here. Like, I'm here to help. Kristen's in charge, so you can go ask her. But there's an ease I get to feel in those moments where I don't have to be the one in charge. But when we let God be in charge, when we let ourselves work through his strength, we're relying on and trusting in him to come through. And I think that's where a lot of that pressure is released for us. Because I had the same way, like I started to realize that when I feel like something has to be done only one way, and when it has to be done now.
Yeah.
And there's usually like a stress point where it's like, if I don't get this done now, like there's a lot going on and it would be really hard for me to get it done right this minute.
Yeah.
And I've started to notice, like for me, that's become a cue to not do that thing.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm not saying that there aren't times that like I feel stressed or like I have to get a lot done at the same time, but there was like this moment of pressure that has become a signal to me that is not God's way.
Well, you're not doing it the wise way. Because I feel like when that comes up for me, worry is taking over.
Yes.
And I cannot be wise and worryful at the same time.
100%. And it's also coming out of fear. Because my fear is if I don't do it now, it won't ever happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not a logical thing. And that's not a faith-filled way to live my life. To say, I'm going to trust that if God's will is for this thing to happen, it's going to happen. And I then don't need to feel this pressure to make sure this thing happens. Yeah. And that's why, like, not that I'm perfect at this, but it's become a big signal for me to stop. At the very least, to stop and question what's happening and should I keep doing this?
Yeah. Well, I feel like too on the back end, if it's like a thing that God has for you and you feel like you're like having to give it up on your own will, he's going to bless you with that thing to the fullest later where you're like, oh, I never even imagined it would be this good or this much of that thing I wanted. But
or sometimes it's like
him have it. He then is like, I'm going to bless you now in that.
But sometimes I also feel like it's like God, a lot of times, it's hard in the sense that my faith has to be big, but a lot of times his way actually ends up being easier. Like I end up being able to come through in a more restful, easy way
Yeah.
But the hard part for me was like trusting God and letting go of something and kind of being like in free space, not being sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in that space, it's for me extremely difficult, but internally.
Yeah.
But like the pressure and the stress is not there.
Yeah.
And then I come out and I'm like, wow, and a lot of times I've fought.
Yeah.
I fight that stuff with God. And then I come out and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, everything was not only easier, but actually is really, really good on this side. Mm-hmm. And the last question I ask here is like, how can you deepen your trust in God to carry through life's ups and downs? I think one of the biggest things is taking those little spaces and those little moments and seeing what the end result is. Because like each time I come out on the other side and I'm like, wow, that was good. And not only was it good, but it was easier than what I thought it was going to be. Like the pressure and the stress and everything that I thought was going to happen, or the bad thing I thought was going to happen didn't happen. And God did come through for me. And I'm not talking about like just bad things not happening for you. I'm talking about like specific things where God is calling you to take a step of faith.
Yeah.
But really allowing yourself to rely on Him and who He is to come through for you. But so when you take those little steps, each time you take a little step, it allows you to take a bigger step. And that's how you can start to grow your faith. It doesn't have to be this big leap all at once. No. It can be something really little. But the more you do that, then you see God as faithful. Mm-hmm. And He is just. And then you can start to trust in Him that way. So that's today's discussion. So if you're reading this on your own, just make sure to include that verse 1 so you can kind of see that background for this. All right. We'll see you guys later.